bankruptcy. That was the cruel reality I was forced to face on my 28th birthday. Just a few years earlier, my life had been shining. I had opened a small bakery by the ocean in Virginia Beach. It was my castle, the embodiment of my passion. On weekends, the sweet, buttery aroma would drift out to the street, and long lines of customers would form outside my door. Seeing their smiles as they savored my creations was my greatest joy, my reason for living. But that happiness didn't last long. When a large coffee chain backed by huge capital opened nearby, the crowds that had once filled my shop slowly began to disappear. I tried to resist the tide by working myself to the bone. To keep the business running, I even took on a large amount of personal debt. But once the gears had slipped out of place, they never returned to normal. The bakery that had once been filled with happy customers eventually closed its shutters for good, leaving behind nothing but massive debt. The one who reached out to me when I had lost everything was my older sister, Denise. "Come stay with us. We have a spare room." Her voice over the phone was the same warm, gentle voice I remembered from years ago. To me, in the depths of darkness, those words felt like my only lifeline. Denise's house was in a quiet residential area of Virginia Beach. Her husband Ryan served in the US Navy and was away on long deployments most of the time. I believed with all my heart that in that spacious house, I could quietly recover alongside my sister and start over. But there was one more housemate I hadn't anticipated, Ryan's mother, Kathy. Kathy suffered from severe rheumatoid arthritis and could barely move her legs. She constantly needed someone's assistance. Denise told me, "You don't need to worry about rent or living expenses. I know things are hard for you. In return, could you just keep an eye on Kathy a little while you're here?" At the time, saying no wasn't an option. I was simply grateful to have a roof over my head. "Of course. I'm the one imposing. It's the least I can do," I replied with my brightest smile, ready to begin a new chapter in this house. But back then, I had no idea. Her words, "Just keep an eye on her a little," were actually the doorway to a long and grueling hell. My days in that house began at 5:30 in the morning, when Kathy's nurse call echoed from her room. I would help her to the bathroom, assist her with changing clothes, and prepare breakfast. After finishing her night shift, Denise wouldn't get up until early afternoon. She would either sigh loudly, collapse onto the sofa, saying, "I'm so tired," or head out in style to meet her friends for lunch. Meanwhile, I took care of everything else. Cleaning every corner of the house, tackling the endless piles of laundry, doing the weekly grocery shopping, preparing Kathy's lunch and dinner, and cleaning up afterward. All of it became my responsibility, as if it had been decided from the very beginning. But what broke me more than the work itself was how much Denise had changed. She used to be the kind sister who encouraged my dreams. But the Denise who lived in this house was like a completely different person, constantly irritated and full of complaints. Her work as a night shift nurse was steadily wearing down both her body and mind. On top of that, she was frustrated by Ryan's long absences and the stress of caring for her demanding mother-in-law. All of those pressures intertwined and stripped away the kindness she once had. And her frustration was unleashed mercilessly on me, the one in the weakest position. Barely a month after moving in, my heart was already starting to crumble under the endless labor and Denise's insensitive remarks. Kathy's arthritis was severe, especially in her knees. She could barely stand on her own, and even walking a few feet to the bathroom required me to support her full weight. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. I'm really, really sorry," Kathy would say breathlessly, always with a look of guilt. All I could do was smile and reply, "Please don't worry about it." I knew none of it was her fault, but repeating this heavy work several times a day was steadily wearing down my strength. In between caregiving, I managed all the housework, picking up Denise's clothes scattered around the house, tidying the magazines she left in the living room, washing the dishes piled high in the sink. Oh, Lauren, I forgot to mention. 2 of my friends are coming over tonight. Could you throw together some snacks or something? It wasn't just once or twice that Denise would casually call out from the living room right when I was in the middle of preparing dinner. The housework and caregiving I did gradually became expected. No words of thanks were offered anymore. On the contrary, if anything didn't meet her standards, Denise began interrogating me harshly. "Why isn't the cleaning done yet?" "This again? You always make the same kind of thing." I had no choice but to stay silent and accept her words. In this house, I was just a guest. A bankrupt failure. I didn't have the right to talk back to my sister. Occasionally, Ryan would call from his long-term deployment. He always said the same thing. "Lauren, thank you so much for taking care of Mom. Denise really appreciates it too. Before, we had to rely on caregivers and housekeepers, and it cost us a fortune. Having you there gives me peace of mind so I can focus on my missions." Those words pierced my heart like a spear. To them, I wasn't Lauren, an individual with my own life. I was a convenient replacement for a housekeeper or caregiver, a useful presence who took care of his mother so they didn't have to worry. That was all I was. Day after day, it felt like wandering through a tunnel with no exit. Somewhere deep inside, I was screaming, "This can't be how my life ends." I couldn't let myself give up and remain my sister's unpaid housekeeper forever. There had to be a way to rebuild my life. And I found that faint glimmer of hope in a completely new world: real estate. After losing my castle, the bakery, the idea of helping others find their own castles and fulfill their dreams felt powerfully meaningful. Because I had experienced failure firsthand, I believed I could genuinely support clients who were starting over in life. More than anything, I needed money. If I wanted to move out and stand on my own feet again, I needed a stable income. So, in between caregiving and housework, I started studying for my real estate license on my own. I spent every quiet moment, when Kathy was napping, when Denise was out, hunched over my textbooks, pouring everything I had into investing in my future. And a few months later, I finally earned my license and secured a job at a rapidly growing real estate agency in Virginia Beach. I got a job. I'll be working at a real estate company starting next month. When I told Denise, she frowned slightly. "Oh, is that so? Well then, from next month, you'll start paying $500 a month in rent. You're working now, so that's only fair, right?" "What? And what about Kathy's care during the day while you're gone?" I was planning to hire a daytime caregiver to come by. Before I could finish, Denise cut me off, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "I see. Well then, of course you'll be the one paying for that. You're the one choosing to work after all. That's the condition." It was an utterly unreasonable demand, one that made me doubt my own ears. But if I argued back, they might try to stop me from working altogether. So I bit my lip and said, "All right." My new job was deeply fulfilling, but most of my paycheck disappeared into paying for Kathy's caregiver and the $500 monthly rent I gave to Denise. What remained barely covered food and transportation. No matter how hard I worked, my life didn't get any easier. Still, work reminded me of what it meant to truly live. Helping clients find their castle, witnessing the moment their dreams came true. It was a joy like no other. The feeling of being needed not as someone's convenient tool, but as Lauren, a professional in my own right. That feeling was the only thing holding me together. But as the months passed, that relentless routine pushed my body and mind to their limits. I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning to help Kathy and prepare breakfast before leaving for work. At the office, there wasn't a single moment to breathe. By the time I returned home, exhausted late at night, I still had dinner to make and Kathy's nighttime care to handle. I rarely got to bed before midnight. The turning point came about 6 months into the job. I successfully closed the sale of a luxury oceanfront property that everyone else in the company had given up on, thanks to persistent negotiations. The deal became a major topic inside the firm, and I was promoted to senior agent at record speed. With the promotion came a significant increase in my salary and commissions. But I didn't tell Denise a word about it. Around her, I continued to play the role of the exhausted younger sister barely scraping by. I feared that if she found out about the promotion, she'd simply demand higher rent. Instead, I quietly deposited the extra income into a secret account, steadily and patiently saving every dollar. One rainy night, I returned home completely drained after finalizing a big contract. When I opened the front door, I found Denise and Ryan laughing together on the living room sofa, watching TV. Ryan was home temporarily from his deployment. As soon as they noticed me, they said they had something important to discuss and asked me to sit down at the dining table. The serious tone made me hopeful for a moment. Maybe they were going to thank me for everything. Maybe they were going to lower the rent a little. But what came out of Denise's mouth shattered that faint hope into pieces. "Lauren, I need to talk to you. Ryan and I have discussed this," she said, pausing to look me up and down as if sizing me up. "I want you to quit your job." "What?" "You've been looking really tired lately, and Kathy's care has been slipping. Besides, Paying all that money to caregivers is a total waste. So I want you to quit for now and focus on taking care of Mom full-time." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What is she saying? She has no idea what it took for me to find this job or how much it has saved me. As I sat there speechless, Ryan spoke up. "Of course, we're not saying this without giving something in return. We'll lower your rent from $500 to $300. It's only fair since you'll be focusing on Mom's care." They want me to pay $300 in rent? They were telling me to quit my job, give up my income, and then pay them rent for the privilege of being their live-in caregiver. It wasn't a proposal, it was a declaration. Something along the line of, "You will become this household servant." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a sense of absolute despair, worse than anything I'd felt when I lost the bakery. My lips trembled as I forced out a single phrase. "Let me think about it." I stood up on unsteady legs, returned to my room, and the moment I closed the door behind me, I collapsed onto the floor. Soundless sobs rose from deep in my throat. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stay in that house for even one more day. I had to leave. No matter what it took, I was getting out of that hell. Since that night, every trace of fear and sadness had vanished from my heart. What remained was a burning anger and a single ice-cold resolve. I'm getting out of here, no matter what. I would no longer let anyone control my life. I would no longer be treated like a slave, my dignity trampled. I would take back my life with my own hands. Thanks to my promotion and relentless saving, my secret account had finally accumulated enough money to give me a glimmer of hope. Enough to start a new life. Just a little more. And I'd be able to leave this house and rent a place of my own. Denise and Ryan still saw me as the same powerless, pitiful sister who had just declared bankruptcy. That's why they had been so confident, so cruelly certain that I had no means of escape when they made that heartless proposal. It was a malicious attempt to sever the fragile path toward the future I had finally begun to see. That's when my secret war began. I lied to Denise and Ryan, telling them, "I'm thinking about quitting my job, but I need some time for the handover." They let their guard down. While they believed I was hesitating, I used every spare moment to search for my castle. It became a race against time. During my lunch breaks, I combed through the company's database, searching for the perfect rental, one that had finally come within reach thanks to my promotion. It was a determined search born from the unshakable hope, I will escape and start a new life. I had spent years finding dream properties for clients. Now, for the first time, I was doing it for myself. And then I found it. It was a small bungalow nestled in a leafy, older residential neighborhood, slightly inland from Virginia Beach. The property came with a rare, almost unbelievable condition. You're free to renovate the interior however you like. The elderly landlord was looking for someone who would lovingly restore the home and live there long-term. The rent was well below market value, and it was obvious why. The wallpaper was peeling, the kitchen was outdated, and the garden was overrun with weeds. To most people, it was a property to avoid, a fixer-upper that demanded time and effort. But to me, it was full of potential. The spacious living room flooded with light through large bay windows, the solid structure and strong foundation. And above all, the idea of transforming this house with my own hands into my ideal space felt symbolic, a reflection of my determination to rebuild my life. I took action right away. Using work as an excuse, I visited the house alone on my day off and discreetly began the rental application process. And then came the fateful day. My phone rang. It was the agent. "Congratulations, your application has been approved." Standing alone in the office kitchenette, I clutched my phone and let out silent sobs. I couldn't remember the last time I cried tears of joy. This was it. I was escaping hell. I had found my castle. The move-out date was set for 1 week later. Ryan would be away on another long deployment, and Denise would be working a night shift. Early that weekend morning would be my one and only chance to disappear without interference. The night before the move, as I massaged Kathy's legs like I did every evening, I quietly told her everything. That I had found a new home and that I would be leaving the next day. She listened without surprise, then gently took my hand. "I see. You've made up your mind, Lauren. Kathy, if you'd like, you could come with me." Before I could finish, she interrupted me with unexpected words, her voice lowered to a whisper meant only for me. "The truth is, I have my own plan. Kathy lowered her voice so only I could hear. I've never told Denise or Ryan, but my late husband left me a substantial amount of money. Just for me. I've been thinking about moving into a quality senior living facility for a long time. I caught my breath. So, Lauren, after you leave, I'll be leaving too. I have one favor to ask. Could you help me, in secret, find the best possible place? Her wrinkled hand squeezed mine tightly. In Kathy's eyes was not resignation, but a fierce light, a determination for the future. She was not some frail, helpless old woman to be pitied. She was a warrior, just like me, someone fighting to escape this house and reclaim her dignity. Of course, Kathy. We held each other's hands tightly. It was a silent pact between co-conspirators. A promise to begin new lives apart, but together in spirit. Everything would change the following day. We would each begin our own battles, and one day, we would meet again. In the light. With that solemn vow in my heart, I quietly drifted into sleep on my final night in that house. On the morning of the escape, I woke in the pre-dawn darkness. At 5 a.m., a small moving truck I'd hired for an extra fee arrived outside the house. I quickly loaded the belongings I had hidden in the back of my closet. I had explained the situation to the movers beforehand and paid a hefty early morning surcharge to make it happen. Once everything was packed and the truck disappeared into the quiet streets, I left an envelope on the dining table. Inside was a short letter and $500 in cash, the rent for the month. The letter read, "Thank you for everything. I'm leaving this house today. I want to live my own life. Please don't try to find me." I could picture Denise coming home from her night shift, reading the note, and flying into a rage. But I no longer cared. As the first light of dawn spread across Virginia Beach, I drove toward my new home, the little bungalow that would become my castle. The moment I opened the door and stepped into the empty living room, I collapsed onto the floor in tears. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming liberation, the pure joy of finally being free. I spent the entire day unpacking, completely absorbed in the work. The house was still old and in need of renovation, but it was my space and no one could intrude on it. I blasted my favorite music, hummed along, and took the first steps into my new life with genuine delight. But the fragile peace I'd gained was short-lived. 3 days after the move, one afternoon, I was comparing brochures for senior living facilities for Kathy when there was a loud, aggressive knock on the front door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing outside. My heart leapt in my chest. When I nervously opened the door, one of the officers spoke to me with a stern expression. "Are you Lauren Hansen? We're with the Virginia Beach Police Department. Your sister, Denise Gale, has filed a report accusing you of theft and property damage." My mind went blank. "We'd like you to accompany us to the residence to verify some discrepancies in the statements." Before I knew it, I was sitting in the back of a patrol car being driven back to the house I had fled just days earlier. When we arrived, Denise and Ryan were waiting on the front porch with their arms crossed, as if they had been rehearsing this moment. Inside the living room, a bizarre scene awaited me. The sofa cushions had been slashed. Scratches had been gouged into the wall where the washing machine had once stood. And in the corner, sitting silently in her wheelchair, was Kathy, her face pale. The moment our eyes met, Denise deliberately raised her voice and shouted, "It's her! I let her live here out of kindness, and she betrayed me, stole money, and wrecked the house before running away." Ryan followed her lead. "I can't believe this. Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Mom's been so shocked she can't even speak." Their cheap performance made me sick to my stomach, but I stayed calm. I always knew something like this might happen. That's why I recorded everything. I took my phone out of my pocket and played an audio clip. "Paying for expensive caregivers is a waste. I want you to quit your job." It was Denise's own voice from the night she'd demanded I quit my job. Undeniable proof. Their faces were drained of color, but Denise quickly recovered and shouted, "That's obviously edited." And then, from the corner of the room, Kathy's calm, clear voice cut through the air. "In that case, shall I show you the kind of evidence that can't be edited?" Everyone turned to her at once. Denise's face went pale. "Mom, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind from the shock?" But Kathy didn't waver. She looked the officers straight in the eyes and continued. "The $500 Denise claims was stolen? In fact, Lauren left that exact amount on the dining table as rent. And the one who slashed the sofa? Kathy's voice was steady, unwavering. It was Denise. 3 days ago, after Lauren left, she flew into a rage and cut it up with a utility knife out of spite. What proof do you have of that? Ryan shouted angrily. Mom's memory has been slipping lately. Lauren must have put her up to this, he snapped. Denise piled on immediately. That's right. Ever since she left, Mom's been acting strange. The two of them desperately tried to undermine Kathy's testimony, but Kathy only smiled softly. Proof? Yes, I have it. And not just any proof. Evidence no one can dispute. She reached into the pocket of her wheelchair and pulled out a tablet. With practiced hands, she navigated the screen and handed it to one of the officers. This is footage from a hidden camera I installed. Let's start with the early morning of the day Lauren left. 3 days ago. She tapped the screen, and the dimly lit living room appeared. A moment later, there. I was on the screen, placing a white envelope, the one containing $500 in cash, clearly on the dining table before leaving with my luggage. One of the officers gave his partner a small nod. At that moment, the theft accusation was completely disproven. And now, Kathy continued, this is the footage from that same night. The exact time Denise claims the property was damaged. She tapped the screen again. This time, the footage showed Denise, her face twisted with rage, clutching a utility knife. She screamed something inaudible and repeatedly plunged the blade into the sofa cushions. The room fell into absolute silence. I watched as Denise and Ryan's faces turned as white as paper, like watching a slow-motion collapse. Their expressions shifted dramatically, from smug confidence to shock to confusion, and finally to the complete despair of people who realized they had lost everything. After reviewing the footage, the officer returned the tablet to Kathy. Then, with an icy, contemptuous gaze, he looked back and forth between Denise and Ryan. All right then, why don't we sit down and talk about the false accusation and property damage in detail? From that day forward, Denise and Ryan's lives unraveled. They were fined for filing a false police report, and Ryan reportedly lost his standing within the Navy. Their reputation in the neighborhood collapsed, and eventually, they sold the house and moved away together. A year later, I left the company and launched my own real estate office. A dream come true. And as promised, I found the best senior living facility for Kathy and helped her move in. Amazingly, after leaving the toxic environment Denise and Ryan had created, Kathy's rheumatoid arthritis visibly improved. We began meeting for tea every week without fail. One sunny afternoon, as we sipped tea like we always did, Kathy grew serious and handed me an envelope. Lauren, there's something I want you to have. Inside were official legal documents prepared by her lawyer. It was her will, leaving her entire estate not to her biological son Ryan, but to me, Lauren. Kathy, why, I can't accept this. Seeing my shock, she gave me a gentle smile. No, I want you to accept it. This is my way of thanking you for the genuine kindness you showed me in that hellish house. My real family isn't Ryan or Denise. It's you. Her words left me speechless. Warm tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. There may not have been any blood ties between us, but what bound us was something far stronger. A true, loving heart.